My name is Dana Vass, and this is Susan Pultman. We're from Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, a couple blocks down the street. So some of familiar faces are here, but also some people from different hospitals. So we'll do our best to touch on as much as we can. Susan is actually a new addition to our team at CHOP. She is a social worker, but was hired as a patient resource navigator. So her job is resources, and we're excited to have somebody that's specializing that and helping families to navigate through these systems. We work very closely with Alex's Lemonade Stand, and we're just thrilled to be here. Without partnerships and relationships with different organizations and communities, we wouldn't have resources to give to families, so we're more than happy to be here. So what are resources? It's a huge and general and broad word, which made this presentation a little bit difficult, which is why we started with the yellow note cards to see maybe what would be helpful to you. We've divided our resource sections into 4 general categories. Financial seems to be one of the most asked about resources, so we will spend a bit of time on that. Emotional and support, transportation, and other, which kind of is a category where everything else falls in. There's going to be several topics that we touch really lightly upon. They would be an entire hour-long, if not more, presentation on themselves. So what we suggest is that you either come to talk to Susan and I after. I'll definitely be here after the presentation. We have our business cards. Or more importantly, if you're not treated at CHOP, ask your social worker. Social workers are resource people, so we hope that they would be available to you to ask your specific questions, but we may be able to tell you what questions would be helpful to ask to get what your needs are, because sometimes you don't know what you need. A lot of people say, what do you need? What can I help with? Especially when you have a newly diagnosed child, you don't know what to ask to help with. So we're hoping that we're going to give you some of the tools to start with. We recognize that all of your children have varied diagnosis and maybe also at different parts of the treatment plan, or maybe even be off treatment. So that also is going to affect what you may be eligible for or what you may have access to. So again, not everything is going to apply to you. In the end, we'll also have a handout with specific websites and organizations that you can go to. So that will be a take home for you guys. So when we talk about resources, there's a couple things that you should keep in mind: availability and qualifying. So availability really mainly focuses on the financial resources. As we all know, this is a really tough time in our economy. It has been for the past couple of years. So unfortunately, that means that organizations have been running out of money. So sometimes there may have been a group that we used in the past and they're not available now. We really feel like it's the social worker's job to help navigate those. There are so many organizations, there's so many websites. You don't have time, most of the time, to find those things. So who can you go to? You can go to your social worker or your patient navigator and say, here's what we're struggling with. Can you help me see what might be available? Also qualifying. Most financial resources have financial income guidelines. They may need you to fill out an application, which social work can help with. Most of the times they require a letter. So at CHOP, the social workers are the ones, here's the situation, here's why the family needs. We also understand it's really hard sometimes to tell your story over and over and over again. And that's, again, where we can lend a helping hand. So relying on your psychosocial staff at your hospital or in your clinic is key to kind of gaining ground of what's available to you, what will actually be helpful to you and your child, and how to ask for help. That is something I think that both Susan and I have learned very quickly. I've been at CHOP for about 7.5 years, and I think almost every family has said it to me. I don't want to ask for help. Maybe I don't need help more than somebody else. I'm always the one helping other people. I can't do this. There are tons of organizations that were built by families that were in your shoes at one point. They know better than anybody, including medical staff who goes home at the end of the day, what it's like to be a parent with a child with cancer. They know that it affects your financial status, your emotional status, and everything in between. Even if you were rock solid stable before the diagnosis, they created these things to help you. Come to us and we can help you. show people as resources. So I talked a lot about social workers. As a social worker, we like to think that we're helpful, but there's going to be a lot of people at your hospitals that can help. So social workers can help with resources, can help be with the emotional support. They can meet with you, they can walk with you through these meetings, they can take notes for you, they can sit down and give you some of the medical information in layman's terms, because we've been through these meetings before. Child life therapists, if you haven't met one, they are phenomenal. So they can help your child through a procedure. They might do medical play to ease their fears or their worries. They may help with distraction. They're going to be an immediate tool directly to your child. So again, if you haven't met with one, I would definitely highly recommend it. And the medical team. This is where you're going to get your medical information from. Sometimes when you're at a teaching hospital like CHOP, this becomes really difficult to navigate. So you're going to have residents and fellows and medical students and interns, and they're all going to rotate every 2 to 3 weeks. So it's learning who does what when, and learning also who the consistent faces are. So your social worker might not change, your child life specialist may not change, and your primary oncologist isn't going to change. So learning how you access those people, and if you can't find them, if you are having a hard time, learning how to speak up and say, wait a minute, I didn't get that, I didn't get this information, let's take a step back and help me. And all of these people can help you do that. I think the key part of our presentation for us is saying that there are people to help you. You have a lot of weight on your shoulders, so we can spread the wealth a little bit.
So we wanted to frame this presentation sort of in more of a personal way. So we're going to tell a story throughout the rest of the presentation of a particular child with cancer and their family's journey. So it's the patient that we're talking about, her name is Lily, and she's a composite of many patients that we've had over the past months and years. So it's not one specific patient story, but hopefully we're highlighting a lot of the issues that various people will face. So we're going to be talking about Lily, who's an 8-year-old girl. She lives with her mom and her dad and her 4-year-old brother, and life is pretty good. They're middle income. Mom is a nurse, and dad is a cable technician. They go to public school. Lily's in 2nd grade. Caleb, her brother, is in preschool. Everything was going along just fine, and Lily started coming home from school with bruises. So the parents were wondering, is she getting bullied? Is she falling a lot? What's going on? Didn't think too much of it. A few weeks later, she got sick. She started feeling kind of fluish. So they took her to the doctor just to see what was going on. Doctor did some blood tests, and they got the news that their daughter has ALL, leukemia. So as most of you probably know, treatment starts very quick. One day you have a kid who's got no problems, next day you're in the hospital in chemo facing 2.5 years of treatment. So it obviously rocked this family's world in a big way. And they had questions that a lot of you probably had as well. You know, A, how am I going to get through this? How's my kid going to get through this? And then he has concerns too. And then things that start to settle in, you know, a few weeks after treatment starts, once you've sort of wrapped your head around the fact that your child has cancer, then what am I going to do about my job? And how am I going to pay for all this? And gosh, I live 60 miles away and I have to drive every day or every week or every 2 weeks. Where am I going to park? How much is it going to cost? Gas costs $10 a gallon now. How am I going to deal with that? So those are some of the initial questions that this family had, especially in the financial realm. And Dana's going to let you know about some of the resources that are available.
So again, finances are one of the huge concerns, and now we're going to actually start going into some of the actual resources. So the first, again, the first bullet point is really a whole presentation on itself. So I'm going to talk a little bit about SSI and Medicaid because they are huge and tremendous resources. But again, if it's not something that you have access to, if it's something that you have more questions about, we would definitely recommend that you follow up with your home social worker who can help you navigate this system more. So when your child has a cancer diagnosis, SSI and Medicaid are things that you can apply for. In Pennsylvania, we are extremely lucky that we have what's called a loophole program, and that means that your child can qualify for medical assistance based on the cancer diagnosis. In most other states, it requires the diagnosis along with income guidelines. Pennsylvania does not have those income guidelines, and we are thankful for that at the moment while we have it. To apply for Medicaid, many families who have already have a primary insurance like Aetna or Blue Cross or Blue Shield, we recommend that they apply for Medicaid as a secondary insurance. Why is this important? Because it can cover things that the primary insurance doesn't pay for. It can cover co-pays, it can cover prescriptions. And while you may only have a $25 copay when you're coming to the hospital 3, 4, 5 times a week, that's really gonna add up, and it's gonna add up quickly. So that's why we recommend it. We recommend, we kind of give a little handout, and again, I can go over this with you more individually at the end if you're interested. You can call and request a phone interview for SSI. Applying for SSI is the first step of this process. You're usually in the hospital when people are starting to give you this information, which is why we request, why we suggest that you do a phone interview. They're going to request that you give them documentation, copies of birth certificates, income things. For SSI, income is looked at, and it's part of the eligibility. If you get denied SSI, you can still get Medicaid. So you do have to go through that initial SSI application. Even if you're positive you're not going to qualify financially, that's the first step in getting that Medicaid coverage. It's a pain. It can be a long process, but it is completely worth it, especially if you have a diagnosis that might be years long. So I recommend it. If you're in a different state outside of Pennsylvania, it doesn't mean that you don't qualify for Medicaid. Your finances are likely just going to be considered. So again, if you haven't done it, especially if you're in Pennsylvania, we definitely recommend that you ask your social worker about it. There's a stigma attached to the word Medicaid. Welfare department, you have to go through your local county assistance office to get it. But this is what it's here for. And those expenses, again, are going to add up over the months and years, and it can be one of the most helpful things that you'll get. And the earlier you get it, the sooner that it can get started and help you out. So we definitely recommend it if you haven't done it. Some national resources. NCCS, I should have written in the whole title, National Children's Cancer Society. They are a group that we use extremely frequently at CHOP. What can they help with? Mileage reimbursement, meals while you're inpatient, parking and tolls. So again, when you look at each thing individually, it's not a lot, but it can really add up. Children with an ALL diagnosis are inpatient for a month, so they're going to cover meals for a month. Children in transplant, 4 to 6 weeks, if not more. Those things really add up, and what they do is they reassess every 60 days, and they send a check directly to your home. They're one of the few groups that actually just send you a check versus helping maybe directly for a utility bill, which we'll get into in a little bit. This can be renewed every 60 days. It has to be done by the social worker. So again, you're going to want to loop your social worker in if you don't have this. They do have some financial guidelines. Their guidelines are about $5,000 in assets. They'll ask that you provide a copy of your bank statement to show where you're at. If you have over $5,000, they may provide you a little less reimbursement, but it's still something that's worth looking into. Social workers do have to write a letter of medical necessity with that application. So again, it's another reason why you want to ask us if you haven't already received this. ACS, American Cancer Society, LLS, Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. And I'm sorry for not spelling those out. But they also have mileage reimbursement programs. They have some transportation programs, which Susan will address a little bit later. And they're also really great information sources. You've already learned, I'm sure at least one person has told you not to Google your child's diagnosis because you're going to get everything under the sun. Half of it's going to be inaccurate, or even more, it's just not going to apply to your child. So these are some trusted websites and sources of information. That and curesearch.org is for educational information about diagnoses, is one place that I highly recommend. You're going to get valid and trusted information. Again, everything might not apply to your child, but it's a good place to start if you're a internet searcher. Local and regional assistance. So I'm not going to get into names of those because everybody is not from the Philadelphia area, but what we mean by that is there's a lot of small groups, local groups. Most of them are created by family members who had a child with cancer that are fundraising to help families just like you guys. They're willing to pay an electric bill, a utility bill, so that your electric doesn't get turned off. These are resources for emergent times where you've been in the hospital for a month, maybe 2 weeks of that was unexpected, you've been at your child's bedside, you haven't been working. What do? You can't go home to a house without electricity or water. These groups are fundraising specifically for that person, for you guys, and they pay bills directly. So they're not going to send a check to you, they're going to send a check to the water company to make sure your water doesn't get turned off. The groups aren't meant to pay all of your bills because that would unfortunately just not be possible, but in a bind, that's exactly what they're here for. A lot of them will also do some fun things too, because we do recognize that your kids are still kids, and we want them to be happy when they're feeling well, so we'll talk about that a little bit later too. And then housing. So you may be sort of local to Philadelphia, but you may live 50 miles away or 60 miles away like Lily's family did. And how can you go home when your daughter or son is feeling sick in the hospital? How can you be so far away? So there are some housing resources. Ronald McDonald House, the Hope Lodge, that's the American Cancer Society Hope Lodge, is out near Fox Chase. It's a little bit of a drive from Philadelphia, but it's for patients that are 18 and older. And believe it or not, children's hospitals do have adult patients, so we did want to put that out there. Host for Hospitals is a free housing resource. It's kind of a unique program where families actually stay in somebody else's home. They may either have an extra bedroom, they may have a little apartment-like thing, or it may be like a summer house or a summer rental where the whole house is open to you. Free resources are great when you're really struggling. That's the place to go. Ronald McDonald House is $15 a night. They serve dinner every night. They have an awesome playroom. So if you're more than 25 miles away from your local hospital, you should inquire to see if there's a local Ronald McDonald House that you can use. So transportation is our next kind of item. Lily and her family, as Susan mentioned, live about 60 miles away, an hour and a half. When you add in traffic on the Schuylkill, it can be 2 hours or more. And that's, we have a great hospital, but the city makes it tough to navigate. So her family had concerns about gas back and forth. What if our car breaks down at some point over the next couple of years? Parking in the city. Again, kind of relates to financial concern, but specifically to transportation.
Transportation-wise, there are a lot of issues, right? There's pricey gas if you're driving. You may be going for a second opinion at a hospital across the country. You may be coming back and forth every day. You may have a child who can't use public transportation and your car doesn't fit a wheelchair. All these different concerns. And the good news is there are resources out there to help with all of these things. Thanks. So gas cards, public transit tokens, emergency transit, those are all things that generally go through the social worker, and they're for emergency use. So we have a stash of SEPTA tokens at CHOP that we can give people. Things like that. If you're really in a bind and you need something now, you need to figure out how you're going to get to the hospital or how you're going to get home, absolutely talk to the social worker. Flights as well. There are a lot of organizations that help coordinate flights. Alex's Lemonade Stand will help pay for flights in certain circumstances. There are also organizations like Angel Flight, where people with private jets or with corporate jets who have free time or who are already going somewhere with a half-empty plane will fly people who need to get medical treatment for free. So those are all things that you can look into. On the handout, I have sort of a link for kind of a clearinghouse of all of those types of organizations. There's also bus organizations of people who own large buses that can get you places. And the website that's on the handout is kind of a clearinghouse for that. Do you want to say anything else about Alex's Lemonade Stands?
Yeah, I mean, specifically Alex's Lemonade Stand, we want to highlight. They do have a travel fund that some of you may be aware of. And they work with a certain group of institutions, and if you're going back and forth there for either treatments that aren't available at your home hospital. So what might that be? Not all hospitals, thank you, do transplant. Your child may get proton radiation, which is only available at 3 or 4 institutions in this country. MIBG therapy for patients with neuroblastoma. Those are just things that you can't get at every hospital, and Alex's Lemonade Stand has implemented this travel fund specifically for those families. So they might be able to help with a flight, or they might be able to help with some lodging if there isn't a Ronald McDonald House, or if the Ronald McDonald House is full. So they, obviously, you guys know, are just wonderful. So there's a full application process. Again, your social worker would need to be the link, but they are more than willing to help out with that. NCCS, which is the organization that was on about 3 slides ago, they also have been able to help with flights in a pinch too.
A big transportation resource is the American Cancer Society. The American Cancer Society right now, they are, and this is only actually true until September 1st, but they have regions or divisions all over the country, and each division offers sort of different things. Some are nationwide, but each division is specific. So since most of you are Pennsylvania, I'm going to talk a little more about Pennsylvania. There are lots of transportation options. And the first thing I'll say is if you haven't been in touch, and this is for everybody, if you haven't been in touch with the American Cancer Society, I would suggest that you call them like tonight or Monday, because a lot of their services, they will help you they'll backdate to the first point of contact with them. So if you were in touch with them a year ago and today you decide that you need to start getting transportation help, if you were in touch with a year ago, they'll backdate for a year. If today is the first day that you're in touch with them, they'll backdate to today. So my suggestion for everybody is even if you have absolutely no needs right now with them, just give them a call. Their number's on the handout. Get yourself in their system, and then down the line, if you actually need them, it'll only benefit you. So the different things that they can help with on transportation, first of all, in Pennsylvania, they have mileage reimbursement. So it's income dependent. It's something like if your family is 450% or below of the poverty level, you qualify, and it's a pretty liberal amount. I find that most of the families, almost all of the families that I'm working with, fit those qualifications. So even if you think you may be above it, sometimes they'll drop it for, well, what are your new expenses? And they'll kind of drop your income from there. So I wouldn't shy away from it. And what they can do is reimburse up to $300 a year for mileage. And they reimburse 23 cents a mile. They send either you or your social worker a form. It's a little back and forth of letting the ACS know when your appointments are, what your round trip mileage is. But at the end of the day, you get a up to $300 in gas cards sent to your house. So that's a great program. American Cancer Society also has a few programs for people who are having trouble actually getting to the appointment because they don't have a car or they're a one-car family and somebody else needs the car. So in regions all over the country, this is not just Pennsylvania specific, there's a program called Road to Recovery where they have volunteer drivers from the community give people rides. So it's not a guaranteed thing, and if you need to drive 300 miles to your hospital, it's not going to be easy to find you a volunteer. But it's something to fall back on, especially if you don't have a car. Unfortunately, it's not available in Philly. It's the one thing that you can't have in Philly. You can drive to Philly if you live in Bucks County, say, and need a ride to Philly. Road to Recovery will work for you. But if you live in Philly and need a ride anywhere, unfortunately they don't, because apparently they had trouble getting volunteers who were willing to drive in Philadelphia traffic. So hopefully that'll change at some point. And they have a couple other transportation programs as well. And then Medicaid transport. Like Dana was saying, most people at some point will end up on Medicaid, especially if they're in Pennsylvania, but also anywhere else if they have a seriously ill child. So on the back of the Medicaid card, there's a number that you can call to get more information about Medicaid transport, but basically they can provide public transportation assistance, so tokens or credits, and if you have a child who is in a wheelchair or for whatever reason can't get in a public transportation vehicle or can't get in your vehicle, then they can send out the big vans that will pick up you and your child and transport you to medical appointments.
We're going to jump a little bit to emotional support, and something that Susan and I think is so important. So for Lily's family, they struggled with how and what to tell Caleb, the younger brother, and we think siblings are so important, and they've really been highlighted in a lot of the current work and research, so it's something that we're focusing a lot more on, which I think is great. And where to tell Caleb. Do you bring the sibling to the hospital? Is it good for them to be in the clinic setting, in the inpatient setting? What information to provide to Lily's school? How to support Lily when she goes back to school, when she's feeling well enough to do that? Coping with the diagnosis in general, learning all the medical information, learning what it's like to get to be in treatment, to be back and forth to the hospital, and just feelings of isolation, especially for the kiddos that are inpatient for a long amount of time. That's something that a lot of families struggle with.
So there are actually a lot of resources for emotional support. First of all, the teams that Dana mentioned in the beginning, your child life specialists, your social workers, even some medical staff at the hospital can be very helpful in that. And I would encourage people to be as open as possible with some member of that team. Maybe it's your social worker you're most comfortable with. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's a child life specialist. Maybe it's a psychologist. Maybe it's the attending doc that you're working with. But whoever it is, I would just encourage people to be as open as possible with your needs, and then they'll be able to help you coordinate that part of your care in the hospital. So out of the hospital, there's also a lot of resources. One of my favorites is called Immerman Angels, and this is going to be on your handout as well. I kind of describe them as a matchmaking organization, although not necessarily for romance. You call them up and you tell them what your situation is, and that can be for you, it can be for your child with cancer, it can be for a sibling. What your situation is and what you're looking for in a supportive relationship, and they will, within, I think, 2 days, match you up with somebody who's already been through it. So a lot of times they're matching parents whose children have recovered, 5 years ago with somebody with a similar diagnosis today. I had a patient a few weeks ago who was 23, and I connected her with Immerman Angels, and she was kind of finishing up her treatment, but was still very much in sort of active patient mode. I connected her with Immerman Angels, and she told me that the person that they connected her with was her age, not too far away, but it was more of a phone relationship. And she's like, Susan, this person knew everything I was going through before I had to say it. She said, she wrote me this email and she said everything that I was feeling, and it was like she was living my life. So that was a really powerful connection for her. And they'll match up children and adults and siblings, and it's probably my favorite resource that I give out. It's really wonderful. It's called Immerman Angels. There's also a lot of online support available, and I have some links to that also in the handout, but the American Cancer Society has an online forum. There's some adolescents and young adults forums that we'll get to in a little bit. Basically, any diagnosis, there's generally also an internet forum for, where you can talk with parents who are also going through it. But like Dana said, it can also be really dangerous to Google the diagnosis. And in that forum, you may have families who have had vastly different experiences than you, and often much worse experiences than you, and so it can really scare you. So I just encourage a little bit of caution when you're going on the online forums. Support groups exist in the hospital and out of the hospital. I know at CHOP we have a parents group for inpatients that's different every week. There are other organizations like the Cancer Support Community, it used to be Gilda's Club and the Wellness Community, and now they've combined into one large organization called Cancer Support Community, although I think some of them are still called Gilda's Clubs. And they have a lot of support groups. Some of them are very general, caregivers of people with cancer or siblings of people with cancer, and some of them are much more specific, like teens with Ewing sarcoma. So those are really great resources as well. And they don't have to be support groups in the traditional sense of people sitting around and telling their stories, which is amazing and very powerful, but it's not for everybody. So for some people, they have programs that are more wellness programs and art therapy programs, so that there's some kind of emotional support for everybody. Counseling and psychotherapy, again, all the hospitals have psychologists, social workers that are trained in counseling parents and siblings and patients. And then they also can refer you out to counselors in your community. Sibling support, I want to highlight one organization called Super Sibs. And if you're not involved with them already and you have more than one child, I would also suggest getting in with them soon. They're a wonderful organization. They provide material things for the siblings, like they'll send them toys and certificates of being a super sib and things like that, and they also provide information for parents on how to talk to the siblings about what's going on, because the siblings are in a rough spot, because on one hand they're dealing with their brother or sister being really sick and all the scariness and sadness that comes with that, and on the other hand, depending on their age, they're jealous, because why does my brother get toys every week? And why does everybody pay so much attention to him when he comes in the room? And what about me? So it's a really complex thing to be a sibling of a seriously ill child. And Super Sibs really gets that and really can help both parents and siblings. And also the chaplaincy department in the hospitals. We can't say enough about them. They're phenomenal. The chaplains, and I can only speak from CHOP, but we have chaplains that are of all religious persuasions. But most importantly, they're non-denominational as well. So you may have a nun who is Catholic and can do all of the Catholic rites, but she's also just a blanket chaplain that can help people of all religious persuasions. And even if you are not a religious person and you want to talk about sort of those bigger questions of why is this happening and why me, the chaplains can be really wonderful people to talk to.
One thing I would say with all of these things, especially the emotional resources, is, I think we as social workers, we're assessing all of the time, and we feel like we're really good at reading people, but there's a lot of times where we can't guess what you're feeling and maybe what you're needing. So we're hoping that, bringing up some of these talking points will help you know what to ask for. I'm feeling isolated. I'm struggling financially. These are things that is our job. You're not going to shock us, most likely, and we're here to help you navigate so that you don't have to do some of that, so that you can in turn focus on your child who needs you more than anything. So let us do a little bit of the legwork. So other resources, these are mostly fun. Lily really just wanted to be a normal kid, and that's really hard to do when you're in the hospital for a month, when you're at clinic 3, 4, 5 days a week, when you might have lost your hair, when you might be looking pale because you need a blood transfusion. It's hard to feel normal when you feel sick. So how can we help kids do that? And also, we use some special pick-me-ups to make them feel special. This is a really tough thing, so how can we say you're doing a great job?
Some specific resources here to highlight, and luckily, there are a lot of people who want to make life fun for kids with cancer, and it's really wonderful. So I'm just going to talk about a couple of them. There's so many more out there. So for wigs and head covering resources, well, I guess that doesn't exactly mean fun, but some of them actually are really fun. The wigs are really neat. So there are a lot of organizations that can give reduced cost or free wigs to kids. And then there are other organizations that just specialize in children's wigs. So I put a couple on the handout as well. But one of them, Girl on the Go, does home visits. So they'll come to your home and show your child all the different kinds of wigs that they can have. What's the difference between synthetic hair and human hair, and how do you style it, and which one do you want, and make it a very personalized experience. And Girl on the Go specifically is not a free or low-cost service. However, if that's the one you want to use, your social worker may be able to help you fund that. There's also some, American Cancer Society has a $100 program for people in Pennsylvania. They'll pay $100 towards your wig. But not all kids want wigs, which is also great. Some kids are totally fine being bald. Some kids don't lose their hair. And we support all of those. Now this is the fun stuff. So wishes. Everybody's probably heard of Make-A-Wish, yes? So organizations like Make-A-Wish realize that sick kids need some pick-me-ups and need some good energy. So they offer wishes. You know, what do you want to do? If you could do anything in the world, what would it be? So for some kids, it's, I would go to Disney World. That's the most common wish. So lots of kids go to Disney World. For some kids, it's, I want to meet Miley Cyrus. For some kids, it's, I want to be CEO of Barnes & Noble for a day. All these different things, these wish organizations can put together, and they're really neat. So Make-A-Wish is the main one, but there are probably 50 others that you can also utilize. Most of them also go through your social worker, but you can also do some research on your own. Camps, I can't say enough about camps. I grew up working at a camp for kids with cancer, and it's why I'm a social worker, and it's why I'm working at Children's Hospital. I think they're the happiest places in the world. I forget Disney World. Camps for kids with cancer are the happiest places in the world. And most of them go from around age 6 to 8 up until age 16 or 17, depending on the camp. And they're places where kids who may not feel like kids get to be kids. And one fear that I hear from kids a lot when I'm talking to them about camp is, well, I don't want to sit around and talk about cancer all day. We don't either. And at camp, you don't. It's sort of a fact that everybody has cancer, and that's cool, and we can also do archery and arts and crafts and swimming and ropes course. And it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. So this year it's a little too late for camp, although there is one camp with availability if you still want to get your kid in like next week. But it's something to think about for next year. And then we put fun stuff on here just to highlight that there are a lot of organizations that do these kinds of things. One on the handout I put down is Casey Cares, and that's a regional thing that I believe is in Pennsylvania and Maryland and New Jersey and the surrounding states. And they'll give out event tickets and toys and movie tickets, and they'll send pizza to the hospital and stuff like that to give just those little pick-me-ups. And things like that you should definitely not be shy about applying for. And anything like that you find out about that social workers don't know, let us know, because we're always excited to hear about more resources as well. I add to my list almost every week with things that parents have told me. So the story that we told about Lily, she was 8. So we also wanted to highlight some of the programs that are available for adolescents and young adults, especially in the past couple of years. They've been doing a real push to include this population and give special resources for them, because sometimes they're caught in the middle because they're not adults, so they don't really fit in an adult hospital, or they are adults but they're not 65 or 70 like the average cancer patient is. But on the other hand, they're also not 5 or 6, and the Sesame Street characters coming to the hospital don't mean anything to them. So there have been a lot of pushes for new organizations. Just a few to highlight. StupidCancer.org is a wonderful resource. It's the foundation is called I'm Too Young for This, and their website's StupidCancer.org, and it's a pretty irreverent website. They're very out there. But they have resources for everything. You can find scholarship stuff on there. You can find support groups. You can find trips. You can find anything on there. Also, a lot of the AYA stuff is online now because that's where the adolescents and young adults are. Lots of Facebook groups. And also the other program specifically that I wanted to mention is First Descents. It's an adventure program for young adults with cancer or who have survived cancer. And they go whitewater rafting and rock climbing and mountain biking, and it's all tailored towards the individual. So people who have had limbs amputated or still have physical problems or have cognitive issues from their cancer treatments, everybody can go on these trips, and they tailor everything to them. They have people with one leg rock climbing, and it's amazing because those are experiences that maybe the kids wouldn't otherwise get to have.
We took some notes about the questions. There were some really consistent themes. The first was nutrition, which is something that's also being highlighted. We won't really talk that much about nutrition just because we're not the experts, but there is a nutritional concerns breakout session. The other was certainly educational, which we touched very briefly on, about what to kind of go back and tell the schools for siblings and patients and how to help with that transition. Because there's a lot of families from CHOP here, I do want to highlight that we actually have a social worker that dedicates one day of her week to educational concern. She's kind of our school liaison specialist. Her name is Eileen Kenna. She's out at the King of Prussia site, so if you're already out at that site, you should definitely ask to speak with her, but you can ask to speak with any social worker. Social workers are the primary liaison between your child's school and the hospital. We're going to be the ones that are giving most of the updates, letting them know when they might return to school. We're going to be the ones that maybe might be able to help you prep the school. So your daughter's not feeling well today. She may have lost her hair. So what can we tell the kids? We do, American Cancer Society has a school booklet that I think I brought with me, and maybe we can start passing those things around. But about transitions back to school and how to make that smooth. A lot of you put down IEPs and 504 plans. So 504 plans are really important in terms of getting back to school. Your child may not have any cognitive delays or learning disabilities or effects from cancer treatment, especially at the beginning of treatment. But what a 504 plan can help do is say, my child's going to have a lot of late arrivals or missed school days. I need intermittent homebound instruction so that when my child can't go to school, they're not missing out on the teaching services. So what does that mean? When your child's at home, but not really up to par to go into school, a teacher can come to the home and do an hour of school in the home. It depends what district, it depends what city. It might be an hour, it might be 2 hours a week. When your child's in the hospital, if there's a 504 plan with the homebound instruction plan set up, then they get a teacher in the school. CHOP has teachers on staff that will come to your child's room, or if they're not on precautions, they'll do teaching in a group setting with a bunch of kids at the same age level. We really stress the importance of keeping your child up to date in school. We don't want them to get behind. It's another way that can help them feel normal. It's another way that can help with the social interaction that is really greatly affected when you're in the hospital for so much. IEP plans are a little bit more specified and individualized. It's something that absolutely social work can help with, but you also need to find a person in the school system that's going to be really committed to helping you get what your child needs. If you're not getting that, you need to talk to the social worker at the hospital. There is articles and documentation, but also we just have a lot of experience. We love to think that every school is going to come back and say, whatever you need, we're here for you. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen. There are a lot of roadblocks in the school system that shouldn't exist, but they do. So Eileen at CHOP is really specialized in that, and any social worker can help navigate that.
So another topic that I heard a lot in the cards, or read a lot in the cards, is survivorship. So survivorship is generally defined as 5 years post-treatment or after, but obviously anybody who's gone through any kind of cancer treatment, we consider a survivor as well. So we're learning now about a lot of late effects of cancer treatment that are just sort of becoming apparent now because cancer survivorship has gotten so much better. 30 years ago, kids weren't surviving as much. Now, thank God they are. And there's all these late effects to deal with. So, first of all, most accredited childhood cancer programs now also have a survivorship program. At CHOP, what this looks like is 1 day a week is survivorship clinic, and kids come in and kind of, it's almost a one-stop shop. They come once a year, they get their cardiac studies, they get a visit with the nurse practitioner. If they need a nutritionist, they visit nutrition, they visit psychology if they're in psychology, and kind of do all of these things, all based around the late effects. So once your child gets into that phase of life, I would absolutely recommend enrolling them in a survivorship program. Also, there's a fantastic book that I put on the handout. It's called Childhood Cancer Survivors, I think. It's on the handout. It's almost a Bible of childhood cancer survivorship. It talks about late effects, both physically, medically, and cognitively. It also talks about the emotional effects and how to talk about this with other people. There's also a lot of concerns around fertility because cancer treatments can obviously affect both boys and girls' fertility. There's a lot of resources out there for that as well. So one of the concerns that a lot of people have with their survivors are, because of whatever late effects they might have, what is their career path going to look like, and what's their trajectory going to be. So survivorship programs have a lot of counseling with that. There's also programs that are through the state, depending on what your child's effects are, whether they're a patient or a survivor. One resource that I love recommending to people is a state resource. In Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, it's called the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation Services. In New Jersey, I think it's called the Department of Vocational Rehab Services. Other states call it different things. And they provide, their goal is to get people working or back to work. So no matter what their physical or cognitive challenges are, they'll assign a caseworker and do individualized counseling and hook them up with programs that will help them get into the workforce or get back to the workforce.